if you want to know why Chelsea can keep spending in the transfer market, then I think this is the show for you, really, because we are seeing, in some ways, a mass exodus of Chelsea players, a major clear out in a rapid period of time before the Premier League returns. And I think part of that absolutely is to make way and fund potential incomings for the rest of the window, but then also just a clutter of the squad, players who don't have a future at Stamford Bridge anymore. So today's show is going to focus on that, because we are only now 13 days, can you believe it, from the start of the Premier League, or at least the start of Chelsea's Premier League season on that Sunday against Crystal Palace. We are only a few days away from seeing Chelsea back in action in those 2 pre-season friendlies at the Bridge. Please do let me know down in the comments. I was thinking about maybe doing a watch along for the game on YouTube, or we may just do our regular review content. Let me know your thoughts on that, just to maybe rotate things a little bit, because I probably won't be doing my usual preview content for a friendly. It's very difficult to do a preview content for a friendly because of the number of changes we see. And of course, we're doing all of our pre-season preview content, which really is the major predictions for the Premier League and my major predictions for Chelsea's season. So like, subscribe, make sure you don't miss any of that. Check out the latest Substack piece, which is all about Alejandro Garnacho making the case for or against signing him for Chelsea this summer. So we know the players are returning today. I thought maybe today's show would focus on that. At the time of recording, which is nearing basically evening UK time, we haven't had any shots, videos. They may, typically, knowing my luck, they will drop, but that will be a part of tomorrow's show most likely, because we're hoping to see Esteval Willian, the new players involved, all of that good stuff. So that will be a part as we look forward. But I thought today's show was a good chance to take stock of what's happened, and especially with outgoings. We do focus a lot on incomings. They are more interesting. Let's just be blunt about that. People are more excited about who is potentially arriving than players who don't really have a future and leaving, unless they are a major player in the first team. But I feel that Chelsea getting their sales right, selling is as big of a part of a successful transfer window as buying, because what you don't want is clutter in your squad. You do not want players who really have no future and you're struggling to sell, and maybe that limits your ability in other ways in the transfer market. There is a lot going on in terms of outgoings, potential outgoings, or ones that are about to happen. And that's only taken place today, as we're about to get into. So this is a general update from Romano about this. So Nkunku is due to leave. There's talks going on. Nicholas Jackson can leave if an important sort of proposal comes forward, a bid comes forward. Sterling is due to leave. Guiu is joining Sunderland on a loan deal. Joao Felix, we already know, is left for Al Nassr. Tyreek George, we're going to talk about him, could also leave. And Armando Broja is also leaving to Burnley on a permanent deal. We found out today that 2 Chelsea midfielders are making their way out of the club permanently. The first one, Lesley Ugochukwu, making a move permanently to Burnley. David Ornstein breaking this story. Of course, he was on loan at Southampton last year. He only a year really into a 7-year contract at Stamford Bridge. It's believed that the fee is going to be about 20 million, which, bluntly, for a player who has barely touched the first team, is a very good piece of business, especially for a loan at Southampton, one of the worst Premier League teams we've seen. I think that is fair because, you know, Ugochukwu, I actually think, did some good things even in what was a atrocious Southampton team. It was kind of a no-win situation to be associated. And to go to a newly promoted side like he did last year is a bit of a risk, but I really hope the best for Ugochukwu. I think the shame for Lesley Ugochukwu is he arrived in the summer of 23 and instantly Chelsea bought Moises Caicedo, Romeo Lavia. The following summer, they signed someone else who we're about to speak about. And Dario Asugo, of course, has recently arrived. So it's just been one after another where Ugochukwu's kind of pathway, if you want to talk it and refer to it like that. You can even add Andre Santos into that as well in terms of midfield depth options for Chelsea. Just made it clear that Ugochukwu was going to find it a real struggle to make his way into the Chelsea first team. And I think it's a shame because I did see some good things, even in the brief moments under Pochettino in the first half of that 23-24 season. And the unfortunate thing is you can't really judge whether Ugochukwu was good or not for Chelsea because we didn't see enough of him. So I know people who are very hot on him and think he will turn out to be a very good player. But I hope for his sake, Burnley is a good destination for him this year. The other one is, of course, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. This accelerated literally today. Everton coming in for him, Everton making the deal possible, and now we know that the deal has been sorted out. 28 million, which you've got to factor in, is almost the entirety of what Chelsea paid Leicester last summer for him. This is where Chelsea have become masters at just selling. You just, whatever you think about Chelsea's transfer strategy, and whatever you think about the clutter, the collateral damage for players clearly not being here for a long period of time, and that not looking very succinct and kind of part of a wider strategy. Chelsea are some of the best sellers, and that is why whenever people get conspiracy theory brained about how Chelsea can keep spending, someone needs to investigate Chelsea. Well, if you're an Arsenal fan, you should be asking your own club why they keep sending a lot of money towards Chelsea for some of our wanted players. And in the case of here, the fees we're getting for these players are very good. The fee we got for Joao Felix was brilliant. The fee we got for Bashir Humphreys, a player who barely ever touched the first team, was brilliant. Lesley Ugochukwu, over 20 million. Armando Broja, I think that is at least maybe close to 20 million to get. Like, it's just, these are brilliant fees for players that you clearly have no use for or are making a move elsewhere because it's the best time in their career. And that's all you can ask for, especially with the UEFA fine that has come in this summer and Chelsea needing to gain about 60 million, I think it is. I mean, it feels like we smashed that. We smashed most of that by selling Noni Madueke to Arsenal. You add on to that Georgia Petrovic making a move and the potential sales that could still happen for Christopher Nkunku. I mean, Nkunku leaving, I still think that's a 40 or 50 million deal if it gets over the line. So we'll have to see on that one and maybe any others. But this is good. You know, Chelsea acting fast. They're getting these deals over the line. Now, you don't give them credit for the original deal. I mean, talking about Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, I was very down on the transfer last summer. I don't think I've been proven wrong about that in the sense that he's turned out to be a brilliant player. I mean, he's basically been an understudy, kind of a standby player for most of his Chelsea career. However, he goes with well wishes because he was involved in both the Conference League final and the Club World Cup final. He seemed like a good professional behind the scenes, you know, not a player that caused any trouble. We always wanted him to do well and the best he could when he got on the pitch. I don't think he was extraordinary. I don't think he was anything more than I predicted him to be. And I think for his own career, I think this is a great move. I really do, because I think it was probably good for him to experience trophy wins, to experience that success. However, for his own development at his age, he's not a young player. He's in the prime of his career. It feels like a bit of a waste of a year, to be honest, just in terms of actually playing senior level football after you were part of Enzo Maresca's championship winning squad. And with Leicester, and maybe there was some feeling that he could be kind of a Jorginho type figure for Maresca. He never was that for Chelsea. But then again, you've got to give the strategy and the consideration at Chelsea to be able to get that level of fee for a player who barely was part of our first team. Is something really. I think especially for a player again who's not young and they've got years and years of high potential, that in itself is to some credit. The one that's a little bit more conflicting on this, because a lot of the names we've talked about, Armando Broja, once we thought maybe he could be the heir to Diego's throne. I feel really sorry for Mando. I think in so many ways it's another classic story of just injuries. Injuries can define a career path. Good luck with injuries, staying fit can keep you on a path that excels you forward. And if your talent's so amazing, as we see with Reece James, sometimes you can even still get through that. But for other players at a certain period of time, it just doesn't work. That ACL, I think it was in the winter of December 2022, I think really was a turning point. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Loftus-Cheek Achilles, and maybe the Hudson-Odoi Achilles, where a player is maybe starting to find their feet and grow and develop into a first teamer and actually showing some really good signs as a player that could be developed, and then something happens, snap, and the whole trajectory of his career changes. And barely able to get on the pitch for Everton last year. I do hope for his case he's able to find new life, new energy. because I think he is a decent level centre forward, and it's a shame that what could have been for Mando at Chelsea. However, Tyreek George is slightly different. I think Ollie Glanville rightly pointed this out, that the way Fabrizio Romano reported this was slightly weird in terms of rewording how it was framed, this exclusive, that either Tyreek George can leave Chelsea or Tyreek George wants to leave Chelsea with reduced game time. To be fair, it had been linked already that Leipzig could be the destination for him, or Bundesliga could be the destination for him, of course, with the Xavi Simons negotiations going on. And to be fair, just on a broader scale, I don't think it's a surprise that someone like Tyreek George is looking at the scenario where you've already got Gittins, Simons, we think is likely to happen, Garnacho, I think will happen, and then you've got Neto, Esteval, and then you've got Giovanni Quenda coming next summer. That's not including any other players who could play in his position or ones that Chelsea may sign between now and next summer. And if you're Tyreek George, who is just coming off of, in some ways, a breakthrough season, not a resounding breakthrough season, but he scored one of the most important goals of Chelsea's season by some distance against Fulham. You want to take that next step. If you're Tyreek George, you don't want to feel like I'm in the same position in 12 months. There's no Conference League minutes anymore, so easy minutes that could be given to him in a weekly kind of bi-weekly basis. They're not going to be there for him this year in the Champions League. And that makes it a challenge. And because I'm a big advocate of the squad depth, but there does become a point where there is just kind of a bottleneck, right? Not all these players can play unless you have a mass injury crisis, unless, for some reason a player really excels above the others and gets to the front of the pecking order. And I think Tyreek George is absolutely a place where he needs consistent football now, consistent senior football. The best case scenario would be, I think, a championship level loan, or I would like a move to Leipzig. I think it'd be brilliant, but I don't really blame the player if he goes on loan and he's looking at other scenarios and thinks to himself, well, even going on loan and I do well, is there going to be a pathway back to me? Look at Carney Chukwuemeka at Dortmund. That's another one we have spoken about. Chukwuemeka looks like Dortmund talks have reignited, really, and that would be a permanent move as well. And he's probably looking at, I wouldn't blame any young English player who looks at what's happened when young, promising English talents have gone to the Bundesliga and found a home, found quality football, consistent football, trust, and been able to boost their reputation to one day return to the Premier League. Gittins has just done it. Sancho is the big example. Bellingham is another example. But I also do think that if George could be alone, I think that'd be great. And I think for him, I always heighten championship loans is kind of a great thing. It's why the loan for Guiu to Sunderland I don't think is a great move for Mark Guiu, just based on my initial reaction. I think for him at his level, unless he really excels when he's playing regularly, and if he plays regularly, I think he, to me, strikes of a player that needs second tier football in English football. I just personally feel at this point in his career, I think Tyreek George is he's at a higher level, I think, at this point of his career, but I in terms of further along in his development, I think he's a bit more of a polished player than Guiu is, who's a lot rawer. But I do think that George needs that consistent football, and even Leipzig, is he going to play week in, week out? I mean, remember when we sent Ethan Ampadu years back to RB Leipzig, and we thought, what an amazing move. And he didn't play that much. And it wasn't a great loan move to him. He got some good minutes, but it wasn't a solidified week in, week out. I think for players like George at this stage of his career, he needs to be moving somewhere where he is going to be playing substantial minutes. In the Premier League, you're looking at bottom half. Newly promoted teams, as we've seen with the deal being done for Lesley Ugochukwu and others. In the Championship, it's that high kind of caliber Championship team. You're looking at the likes of maybe Ipswich, where Mark Guiu was linked. You're looking at other teams in that top echelon. Norwich, I think, would be a decent place to go to this season. Sheffield United. Teams like that where you're challenging, but I think there's a more realistic path for consistent minutes. So, and just on the Tyreek George thing, it'd be a shame to lose him. But I can't sit here and say that Tyreek George has been such a success story that we have to keep him. I mean, I'm just based on my own bias and my assessment, I personally feel that Josh Achimpong is a bigger talent to keep in the first team. I think Josh is ready for first team. I think he's ready for senior level football. That could be an interesting conversation this year. But the good thing about Josh Achimpong, I think he could also play centre-back, and there's a discussion going on about centre-back depth at the moment. I think Josh could do that along with playing right centre-back. If you say only one can be kept, I'd be much more disappointed losing Josh Achimpong. But it's always sad when you feel like a youngster, an academy grad, leaves maybe before he has a chance to fully establish himself. But that is, we know the churn and consistent squad turnover that we see regularly at Chelsea. And when Chelsea are pushing for not only Simmons but Garnacho, there comes a point where not only are you going to have to sell players, but some players are probably going to turn around, especially young ones who aren't established. Not because they don't want to compete, but because they maybe think to themselves, is there really a chance here for me to develop, get serious minutes? I'll be looking elsewhere. So that is it for today's show. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be back covering whatever's going on at Cobham, the transfers, ramping up to the weekend's pre-season friendly. So thank you again. Follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again very, very soon. All the best.